Hey everyone, welcome back to Anvil of Doom Miniatures, and today we're going to set sail and dive into painting some more Man of War minis, but this time we're going to create a battle fleet for the dwarves. Now, mountain dwelling dwarves hanging out on some boats in the middle of the ocean seems like a really weird concept to me, but obviously the wackier the better, and Man of War seems to be full of crazy shenanigans. If you've watched Josh's battle reports from the Crown of Command, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and if you haven't seen those battle reports, make sure you go watch them after this video, because these little videos have got me really excited for this small game. But anyway, that's enough chit chat. Let's get straight into it and paint some dwarf ships. I've had these minis in my pile for long enough, so it's about bloody time they get some attention. Today we'll be painting a box of dwarf ironclads, some sleek monitors, a group of Nautilus, and the cherry on the cake, this bulky big dreadnought. I'm pretty close to having a complete dwarf fleet. I think I'm just missing a couple gyrocopters, but I'll get those later on when I'm penciling my first actual game. These little beauties do have a thick coat of old green paint, so I'll strip them back as best I can using some alcohol and a trusty old toothbrush. I just want all of the main areas free of paint, and if I can't get it all off, I'm not too stressed. Generally, if it's not a display piece or a competition level mini, I'm not really too fussed these days. When I first started painting, I was a bit more of a stickler. If it's not too noticeable, it really doesn't matter. Now, the fun thing about Man of War minis is that some of them do come in multiple parts, but as they are super simple, they're really easy to build. It's kind of similar to building Lego blocks. You may just need some strong glue to hold them together, and like always, I'm just using a 2-part epoxy. The only issue you may face, like I have today, are the flagpoles. I painted up a Chaos Dwarf fleet a few months ago, and all the poles were marked and in easy to glue areas, but with these dwarf ships, you kind of have to make your own spot for these poles. Looking at the boxes really didn't help either, as it looks like they've been modified a bit, but that's okay, because in the end, I just decided to add the flags to the ships that had space for them, and the Nautilus is a submersible anyway, so technically it really doesn't need a flag. Now, these ships are going to be used as playing pieces and probably carted around, so not having the flags on them will help a bit, and I'm thinking a quick, simple, bold paint scheme that can easily be recognized from across the table will be the go for these minis. They are pretty tiny, and as they have all these little panels, I won't be able to add huge amounts of detail, so going for a classic, simple old hammer look might be the way to go. And today I'm going to use the frowned upon layer, wash, and highlight approach to these doughy warships, just so I can be a bit more messy with my first few layers of paint, as the washes will cover most of the mess up, and then I can build my highlights up later when I'm in the mood to focus on the finer details. I usually like sticking to the box art, but today we're going to go a bit wild and veer off the beaten path and give these ships my favorite colors for dwarfs: green, yellow, and a hint of red. The box art has these painted with blue, red, and black, and I did paint these colors for my Chorf ships earlier this year, so I feel like this scheme fits the bad boys from the Darklands just a little bit better. At the start of the year, I was lucky enough to be introduced to a lovely fella named David, who's a pretty big fan of this old game and an active Man of War community member. After having some great chats, he expressed to me how he would love to see this old game to get some much needed coverage, and I couldn't agree more. Obviously, as time goes on and support for games like these ends, they become easy to forget. I guess these relics of the past is what I'm really interested in, and it's not just playing the game itself, it's the aesthetic and the artworks on the boxes and packaging, the retro and simple look to the minis, the old advertising materials and those classic white dwarfs, the weird idea of taking the old world setting to the seas. The list really goes on and on. It's funny to think that your 2,000 point Warhammer Fantasy army could also have a small battle fleet of ships to carry their legacy and supremacy onto the water. It's easy to forget that just like our world, the Warhammer Fantasy world has vast oceans that could easily be battlegrounds for any race. Shipping lanes for trade and exploration could easily be taken advantage of by some Skaven to get some new shiny things, or for some Dark Elves to acquire some fresh slaves. Plus, it is well known that the High Elves were a force to be reckoned with over most of the world that was, and that's what I find funny about the ships that I'm painting today. Having the dwarves in the middle of the ocean makes me chuckle a bit, and it does make me think that they are somewhat out of place, but they do have some of the most advanced machinery in the old world and have been known to do some exploring, so what's really stopping them from making some submarines and battle barges? Also, there is a huge dwarven port hold located around the Black Gulf area called Barak Var, which was visited by Gotrek and Felix at the start of Orc Slayer and was blockaded by some nasty green green-skinned ships, which were dealt with by our favorite Ginger Short King. Anyway, I'm kind of babbling on right now, but it's definitely a fun concept that these races are battling for dominance, not just on land, but on the seas as well, and I recommend taking a look into this game if you're curious. Now, Dave, who hooked me up with these boats, is an absolute champion, and he sent me a pretty grand box of Man of War goodies to paint for you guys, which I'll sprinkle in throughout the next year or so make sure you subscribe to see my Man of War journey in some future videos. A board build for this game is definitely on the agenda, and I've been visualizing how I want it to look for quite some time, and I think I've settled on something fairly fun but easy to pack away, because right now my hobby space is an absolute bloody mess. So let's move on to highlighting these suckers, and one thing I love about these minis is the simplicity of the sculpts, which in turn makes these things a breeze to paint. Each area is clearly defined, and going for some bold block colors does work well, so you can just choose your army's typical paint scheme, slap it on the hull and on the bridge, and there really isn't any wrong area for color to be on. Sometimes when we paint those little plastic men, leathers need to look like leathers, clothing needs to have some sort of shape to it, which can be a chore, but what's best about these minis is that there isn't any tiny little eyeballs to paint, and that really reduces the stress levels. Well, it reduces mine anyway. I've been hyper focused on some larger projects lately, like my Cauldron of 1,000 Poxes kit bash and my Wood Elf Forest Dragon, so it's really nice to have a break from these fairly complex tasks and paint surface areas that are easy to reach and hard to stuff up. Now, one thing I've noticed about Man of War is that there actually aren't too many minis on the secondhand market compared to other Warhammer games, and that's really no surprise, as it was a pretty niche game even back in the 90s. The secondhand minis I have found online are pretty pricey, but that's normal here in Australia, as eBay can be very overpriced. Maybe the prices for these things are better where you are from, and I really hope that's the case. I took a quick look around online to see if I could find anyone out there making some little ships or 3D printable proxies, but I couldn't find too much, and there's probably a hole in the market that someone could easily fill. I did find a fair few on Etsy, which looked okay, or scans of the older minis, but if you know of anyone out there making some little ships, let me know down in the comments below, because I'd love to know. So the yellow is now finished, and it's giving my boats a kind of rubber duck-like look, and I'm definitely here for it. But let's move through the greens now, and what you'll see that I'm doing with these highlights is painting warpstone towards the top of each little panel to make it look like it's getting some light coming down from the top. You can see a lot of brush strokes, and as I said earlier, if this was maybe a cloak on a wood elf or something like that, I'd be blending it in some more, but these things are pretty tiny, so you won't notice the transitions too much. I then move through to some moot green for those final edge highlights around the windows, and I also edge highlighted every panel as well. I would usually save a green like this for a warp stone or maybe some emerald sort of stone on a weapon, but I love how punchy it is and also has some heavy contrast. For the reds, I'm going to use Mephiston Red today instead of my usual Evil Sun Scarlet, because unfortunately I left the pot open last week and it's completely dried up. The curse of the Citadel pot strikes again. Anyway, I did find that Mephiston Red wasn't too bad. It is a little more muted compared to Evil Suns, but it does the job, and that's the main thing. I then moved through my usual Wild Rider Red and 2 thin coats Orange Flare for those edge highlights, and I found that it was still vibrant, and that's all I was after. To finish up these little doughy ships, I then smashed through my True Metallics, scratching on some Runefang Steel and a final polish with some silver here and there, and for the golds, I went back over with some Thalax Gold, and then a final polish up with some Thalax Gold mixed with some silver. To get to this point didn't take me much time at all. It probably took me a couple days, and I think this was actually my quickest batch paint I've ever done for the channel, so I'm a very happy boy. Now time for the fun part, and I'm going to cut out a couple flags of this original paper flag sheet that came with one of the boxes, and then I applied some clear glue on one side of the back of the flag, wrapped it around the pole, lined it up and stuck it together, and job done. And that's pretty much it. Here is my Dwarf Man of War battle fleet. Thanks so much for sticking around to the end of the video, guys. And like always, I want to say a massive thank you to my Patreons for making videos like this possible. And I also want to say another thank you to David for sending me some awesome Man of War minis. I really appreciate it, and I can't wait to make some more videos on Man of War. If you want to join the Anvil of Doom Patreon, the link is down in the bio, and I look forward to catching up with you in the Discord. And that's pretty much it. I'll see you all next time. Cheers.